All right, here we go. All right. Would like to welcome everybody to our cybersecurity update 2022. Today, we're going to be focusing on reducing your risks. I've got Josh Barker here with me from techrug.
How's it going today?
Yeah, thank you for taking time to join us today, Josh. Josh is actually my cybersecurity or cyber liability insurance provider. I've worked with their company for quite a few years. He's got an extensive background in the industry of providing insurance and cyber liability protections. I've been myself working in healthcare for over 20 years. I past president now of the MGMA of St. Louis. Was the president for a couple of years. And so, yeah, just been doing healthcare for a long time. And we are going to help you learn a little bit more about what's going on currently with issues in cybersecurity. We're going to kind of go through the risk assessment process that you have to go through to get cyber liability insurance. And we're going to help you work on reducing your total cost on cyber liability insurance by handling some things that are really just best practices. And we'll go into details on those as we work through some of our slides. So the risks that we're looking at are varied. Stolen devices are still a big deal as far as like data loss and those devices not being encrypted and protected. Hackers are just about a quarter of the issues as far as like data loss goes. The number that still boggles my mind is 1 billion plus malware variants. It was only 80 million in 2009. It was 800 million in 2018, and now it's over 1 billion with a B that your IT company or IT employees, depending on the size of your practice, that's a lot of responsibility for them. And there's not a single tool that helps prevent all those because they're just so varied and just persistent everywhere. Like you go on the dark web and like they put kits together for you to buy to be able to go and like run attacks against people. And they package them real nice, just like if you're going out shopping on Black Friday, they'll have deals and specials, and don't really be trying to push different parts. There's 16,000.
It's scary that the cost of those, I don't know, you call them software widgets, applications, whatever on the dark web, they're fairly inexpensive. And, you can scale that to what size company do you want to go after? It's really just a matter of, does someone have enough time and the willingness to learn how to do it? So I think that's what makes this so scary with those malware variants, and how easy the dark web access is they're always going to manipulate. That's why there's always patches and updates. It's a constant dialogue, I guess. It's not a destination.
Yeah, it's a battle, and like they're really good at like writing scripts to kind of like auto run some of those too. So like more and more you can know less and less and like do some real damage, and it's just not hard. It's concerning.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, you see the trend, things are only going to get tougher, right? We're not going back to doing all of our banking in person and, paying bills. Like people are going to continue to do online banking and everything through an app and link all their accounts. So yeah, we just got to find some sort of a way to make things harder on the bad guys.
Yeah, and like they really got excited about the COVID situation and started doing a lot of domain registrations through that period of time, just trying to get people to get to the wrong websites, trying to learn information about what's going on there, and then compromising them, giving them malware payloads. And yeah,
for sure.
It's weird. Yeah, and there's like, there were coupons that were on the dark web that were like COVID-19, put the coupon code in and get a discount. Like it's pretty weird, the stuff that I was seeing out there.
I think you're familiar with the SaaS model, the software as a service, and the solutions you provide. Well, they have a CAS model, which is crime as a service.
Yeah.
It's the same general concept. Yours is to prevent theirs is to get around yours. It's just insane what's possible now and available.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in that business too. And we'll get into that a little bit with the ransomware, but like it costs a lot of money to deal with getting hacked, or if you're paying the bribe, it costs a lot of money, but it's big revenue to make out there in the cyber crime space. As you can see, the losses for businesses that have at least reported to IC3, which is the FBI site for tracking internet complaints, basically, as far as malware attacks and hacking go. 2016 was 1.5 billion in losses versus 4.2 billion in 2020. And that's just going to keep going up year after year.
Yeah, it's going exponentially, right? I mean, look at 16 to 17 there, but it actually went down a little bit, and then you just see this huge jump where almost doubles the following year and then continues to go up $1 billion a year roughly. And again, these are FBI numbers. So this is just the US, they're not overseeing anything internationally. So we're just seeing our small sliver of the world. This isn't even the global scale of how bad things are.
Yeah, it's staggering. This is just a different view of some of that data in that same year, identifying like what types of crimes were happening. So you've got phishing over on the left, that's the prevalent one, and then you got different extortion and personal data breach and identity theft, which is also a big issue because like that identity data is the starting point of getting payment data and then working your way through really compromising people, because between your payment information, like your financial data and your healthcare data, that you can go online on the dark web and like you can buy insurance card packages and different stuff that have been compromised and are legit, and go do like healthcare tourism on it, and it's a lot cheaper than buying healthcare. So I mean, it's a pretty savvy marketplace out there, and what they're doing with all this data and just with malware.
Yeah, it's and that's what I think people don't realize, like how a social security number, the value of one social security number is a couple bucks online, right? That's not what they want. They want batches of those things to make any real money, but it's taking that information and then pretending to be you, getting stuff alone as you, signing up for this subscription or doing whatever. That I think is where the value to criminals is in the data. It's not so much that we're going to farm this out and start marketing because we noticed that they shopped at Home Depot, so we're going to send them ads for our business. No, it's completely different. You're not buying a sales sheet, I guess, or a leads list with these types of records. You're trying to do something.
For sure. So the primary causes of concern that I'm seeing like in our space continuously is phishing and ransomware, which a lot of times those will go hand in hand in executing an attack. Really with the COVID trend, the insider attack is becoming a big deal, even if it's just like your data is leaving your business, and like how are you securing it, especially with a lot of pivot to remote work. Now we've got a more recent looming concern with Russia and what's going on over there in Ukraine. And we'll cover that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then there's just the loss of operating funds for your business and personal funds. Like that's a cause for concern. Like I like retaining my money. I'm sure everyone else wants to make sure their retirement account's secure and all that. You don't want it to just get hijacked from someone when there's like a lot of ways to mitigate those risks. They're getting a lot more sophisticated too. Like some of these are just like super smooth, where like the FedEx ones and UPS, those are like everyone receives packages. Like we've become a lot more familiar with online, especially through the pandemic times. And so some of those I saw were really even missing like the misspellings that have characterized them a lot, and they're just so much more smooth. Um, of the 620 million attacks launched last year, 442,000 of them were brand new. They just brand new. So they're creative and they're going to continue doing that because, again, they're trying to get paid.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is very similar. I think something we can all relate to is the COVID and the variants, right? Like things keep changing. We learn the rules for one thing and then it changes. And oh, we got to account for that. It's the same thing here. They're going to throw out just all these different, strands, I guess, of the virus, of the malware or whatever, and see what works and what doesn't goes away. But it's an absolute just numbers game. It's a probability thing. If we throw out 422 or 442,000 new strands, something's going to work, right? Obviously, you've got 62 million or 620 million attacks launched, all from these different spaces. So that's going to continue to be a trend, because if once you and your people find something, you find a solution to it that usually doesn't work anymore. So then they're on to the next one, right? Rinse, repeat kind of thing.
No, 100%. So the basics of a phishing attack is like 3 components. You've got to create some kind of bait, which is information. You've got to have some kind of hook, which is the promise, and then you got to execute the attack or the catch. So one way you can do that is like send, a lot of times emails will get sent, or so one I like is, or like to talk about, is this banking scenario. This CFO takes vacation. They have a personal Gmail account that they use. Their account had been compromised because they just had a username and password and no other way that they were securing their Gmail. Someone may have got their account credentials off the dark web, or maybe they had an easy password that they used for all their passwords, whatever it was. And the attacker was monitoring, because it was a fairly large financial institution, and saw that this individual was taking a vacation. And so they leveraged that time period to contact the controller and be like, hey, controller, I am on vacation and I forgot to send these wire transfers that I told the CEO I was going to send. Could you take care of that for me? So the controller takes the bait, they send the wire transfers, and there was several, I think it was like $40 million involved in that one. They only ever recovered 8 million of it. And that was just sending an email and monitoring and like typing in a similar style to what the CFO used. And they made, cleared $34 million, which hasn't been recovered. Like, it's gone.
Just like that. And from my perspective, the thing to keep in mind is, we contact the FBI. I've had a client with a very similar situation, kind of had fished for some credentials, came off, as a legit, partner of the company. And obviously they weren't. So the FBI swoops in. It's exactly what you would think, right? Black suits, sunglasses, all business, just the facts. They interview some people, take some machines back with them, and they roll out just as quickly as they showed up. But the downside is the FBI is not really, their top priority is not getting your money back. They're figuring out, who did we just fund? We just got somebody some planes, some tanks, a bomb, resources, whatever. Where is this going? Is it China, Russia, ISIS, North Korea? Like, who knows, right? And that's the thing that I think is concerning or shocking to a lot of folks. Is, if they can get your money back, great. But usually once you hit send, it's kind of like it's gone. Maybe they can help, maybe they can't. But yeah, the reality of it is the authorities that are there that we're responsible to notify don't have any real interest in getting your funds back. It's more, now what do we have to worry about? So that's the scary thing I think people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and so so phishing attacks go hand in hand with ransomware attacks, and actually the mechanics of them are pretty much identical. The phishing attack may be used in order to get you to click on something so you can then download a payload. So like some piece of software that goes on your computer. And what that software does, it may do it immediately, or it may be something that waits a little bit, but it'll start encrypting your data, your hard drive, your network share. And the goal of that is they are trying to extort you. They are trying to get paid. So instead of trying to get a wire transfer initiated, there's just like, hey, we're going to hold you hostage, and we're going to hope you have bad backups, or maybe you've never tested your backups, so they're probably bad. And so then they're the only game in town. You either move forward without having your data, which is pretty hard to run your business, or you have to pay out. And if you pay out, then you continue to support that behavior. But the good news is there's ways that you can mitigate dealing with the ransomware attack. There's quite a few, and they all fall in line with the National Institute of Standards Technology IT best practices. And so we'll cover some of that as we work toward the end here.
Absolutely. And I think, to go back to the phishing and the ransomware attacks here, I mean, a lot of us think we won't fall for those scams, or they won't happen, they won't get us, but they are very sophisticated. Again, it could look like it's coming from Derrick, but the O in your last name is a 0, right? But everything else, same font, same colors, same everything, looks the same. So, I mean, you get those spoofing things, but then also when you do have those business email compromises and now someone's operating as you, a lot of times once they're in your network, they're not, hey, I got in at noon and I locked everything down at 1 p.m. They're hanging out in there to see your calendar and see when that vacation comes up. Or, oh, it's convenient. It's a long weekend. We've got, spring break coming up. We've got Memorial Day. They'll look at you on that Friday before you're going out of town. That's when they're going to deploy. They might have been in there for 3 months, but that's how they act. So it's usually not day one type situations that we see, which actually makes it worse because they may go in and adjust configuration. So you're not getting notified that maybe the backups aren't being done, but they know they're not, or they're deleting it. They'll give themselves enough time to cut off the, any kind of attachment that you could get. And then once there's no bridge to go back on, now they implement it and they've got you, and that's the reality of what they want to do. It's not just boom, boom, because they know that we can restore from backup. So they want to cut off the tail before, so there is no way back.
Yeah, a lot of attacks on average will take longer than 100 days to realize they've happened from the time they get into the system and then execute, a payload. It's a long time to cover your tracks. It's a long time to go back through event logs to determine like how an attack happened. So they're making investigations hard by having that kind of delay in there too.
Oh, absolutely. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, then we have like the great resignation going on. Like everyone knows it's hard to find employees. I know a lot of my medical clinics, like they're just having a heck of a time keeping staffed up. And the pandemic's just like exasperated that. It was already kind of an issue before, but now it's like everywhere you go, everyone is hiring in all industries and all verticals. And so that creates this issue with like, where's your data going? And there's starting to become like quite a bit of new IT cybersecurity budget spent on mitigating the risk of insider attacks, whether it's like them maliciously wanting to take that data and do something with it, or never returning the IT laptop that has just tons of spreadsheet data on there. And us as like business owners, it's our responsibility to make sure like healthcare data, financial data, that kind of stuff is like protected, because there's certain compliance requirements around that. And so like this is just a whole new risk that we're having to deal with in 2022 that wasn't quite as active of a risk in like 2019. So it's just a whole new variable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's not industry specific because of every business is out there looking for employees and hurting, and the turnover is just ridiculous. I mean, I get a ton of calls about, hey, we need to add this driver to our policy, and a week later, like, yeah, it didn't work out. Okay, cool. Well, we'll take them off. So I'm seeing that across the country with all of our clients. Everyone's what's hurting with that. Well, once you get someone in and you give them credentials, well, are we making sure that we remove those credentials when they left, or tracking what they actually have access to? Because we want to hope that people are good, but some people are opportunistic. Some people, it's through no fault of their own, right? I left this laptop at Starbucks, my order came up, I got a call, and I left, and boom, it wasn't encrypted, it wasn't protected, here we go. Those kind of scenarios happen all the time. It's baffling, but it's only going to continue to get worse with folks, not working, the high turnover, and then also the remote work, and not having the same security standards and infrastructure at home as we do at the office, right? Companies are willing to invest that at the office. Well, what about your remote workers? Are we paying attention to what they're doing at home, to prevent the laptop that maybe they bought 5 years ago that has had no updates or patches on it? We don't really want to necessarily be working on those things. Hey, great progression there. Guess I sync that up.
Yeah, smooth. Yeah, like Josh was saying, the remote workforce is definitely like changing our role as like cyber security experts and trying to consult our clients. Phishing attacks just get a lot easier to execute. Trying to get that easy button, so like weak passwords seem to have popped back in. I thought we were starting to get a handle on that. Unencrypted file sharing, again, because like maybe someone's got like really poor internet where they're at and they can't make a VPN work due to latency issues, and so now it's like, well, we lose that encrypted tunnel between the office and the remote site, and so now you're just sending files around in clear text, and who knows what their personal devices are like at home or how infected their network is, and like that makes your work device more vulnerable. Insecure home Wi-Fi, where you can just like pull up outside the house and like jump on it and see whatever traffic's moving around, not encrypted. And I mean, we can go on and on and on about remote work vulnerabilities. Are just too many to even.
Well, to your point, I mean, I think the password thing, like, we're just inundated, especially if everything that we have has a 30, 60, 90, 120 day where it's got to be updated, and you can't reuse anything within the last few, and it's got to have this, but it's got to have only so many characters, but you can only get so creative and still remember things. I actually just had to update my Microsoft password. Well, I did it here at the office. Well, my laptop at home's linked to the work stuff, and I go home last night to fire up. I was like, yeah, let me send this out real quick. Could not remember the password to save my life. And I'm like, oh crap, how do I access? So obviously I found it here today and stuff, but there's just overkill. We're trying to remember all these numbers, all these codes, make it creative, don't reuse it. So I get the fatigue of people, and whenever something's difficult or it becomes an inconvenience, then folks aren't going to do it. And that's where, password managers and things like that, I think, and password generators, things like that aren't just your pet's name and, the year you were born, exclamation point, right? So just do things to make it harder. But I think you don't have to go it alone is kind of where I'm getting at. There are resources out there that can help you still be strong, secure, and access all that stuff without having to, man, what did I change that to? Be in the boat I was in last night.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was, I used to have a fancy algorithm I used in my head to manage different softwares at access and stuff. And once we got IT glue installed in our business, I threw that algorithm strategy out the window, and I just let that generate my secure password, let it save my secure password. And I've got, just for healthcare technology advisors, like pushing 450 different credentials that we have, unique credentials, just to operate our small business. That doesn't include any of our clients or any of the sport we do. It is mind-numbing how many there are. And to think, like, in the aughts, people will just put them in a spreadsheet.
And like the old school method, that I've found is, when someone's out of the office, maybe you've got to peek in on their emails or help out with something. Oh, I don't know what their login is. Usually it's like, top right drawer. You find that it's always going to be there, but sadly that's become more secure than putting them on some spreadsheet on your machine or something like that, because you don't want to have all those in one place that somebody outside could get. So the likelihood of someone actually walking into your office and stealing that stuff, it is a possibility. But usually if someone's coming in physically, it's to take equipment, things of value, not information, versus the virtual threat is always, digital information, things like that.
Oh yeah. So then we got this new one that when I was talking to Josh about putting this presentation together, it wasn't on our radar. I mean, there's always been cyber actors from Russia, China, North Korea, and different places. But now the concern is with all the sanctions being applied to Russia, they've got a war they need to fund. I am concerned as a cyber security professional about an increase in attacks being executed from Russia. They've already been into our major systems. They compromised SolarWinds last year, which is a software that does a lot of management of government IT spaces. And so just really concerned about them trying to raise more funds through Bitcoin, because it's not backed by banks and it really can't sanction them from using Bitcoin or stealing Bitcoin or asking for ransoms of Bitcoin. It's fairly hard to track and trace. And as their, as the funds to their country from outside their country get cut off, I just see this being a resource they're going to exploit more and more and more, and it's going to affect our businesses, healthcare, finance. Those are going to be some of the top focuses, energy. So just it's getting even more and more and more important to keep your best practices in place and have phishing training and all the different things we'll cover here toward the end.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all of the claims that we see, ransomware attacks and things like that on our clients and other folks, is that they don't ask for it in US dollars. They want it in Bitcoin, which ultimately means that you've got to go find a currency exchange broker and say, hey, I want to convert my US dollars, because that's what the insurance policy is written at. We have $1 million in coverage. Well, if that's going to be the payout on this particular event, you've got to now go find somebody, have them convert it to whatever the going rate is. And they may say, hey, we want 3 Bitcoin in order to do this. All right, well, the rate today is 40 grand. I've seen it as high as 62,000, I think. And I think the lowest claim that I had, a guy, if you want to say he timed it right, when his client got hit, it was only going for 1,600. At the time, it was like this absolute just bottom out of the cost of Bitcoin when he timed it, and then a year later it's going for 40,000 plus. So you've got to factor that in, which is also a time limit. It's not like these guys are just 24/7 go online or call them up and they'll convert it. You've got to work these things out. Sometimes there's only so much Bitcoin available if you are going to play their game. I think that was the big thing with the gas pipeline, was the amount that they were asking for in Bitcoin was just insane. It was like, you can't come up with this. It reminds me of the scene in, Austin Powers, where he asked for, $1 trillion. And they're like, that much money doesn't even exist in the world. It's kind of similar situation. So I don't think the end game was to ever get that payout. It was to more get people coming for negotiations and things like that. But it is a legit threat. And as helpful as crypto is, and I do think there's some cool points to it, it does create that anonymity that would be, I don't know who I sent this to. I can't track where it went. It's very difficult. The blockchain and the way that it was created is designed to be private and be, very difficult to manipulate. So it's a good and a bad, right? It's a double-sided sword. And unfortunately, you get folks, take it. It's inanimate. So it's not good or bad, but it's how it's used, right? Yeah. And that's what you're finding. If the wrong people get the tools in their hands, then look out. It's not going to turn out well.
Yeah, and you can also launder, if you will, Bitcoin. You can run it through a tumbler, so it makes it even harder to try to track and trace, just like people launder US dollars or whatever.
Yeah.
Moving around enough times where it really gets the water's muddied on where it came from and where it went to.
Yeah. And if you're selling off in piece, not the full coin, then it's even harder because you just took this and divided it by 100 people. So now we've got to try to log that out, and they could just all filter it back in. So
yeah, that's pretty wild.
Crazy.
So, what do you do? So like there's a whole bunch of risks. They're getting increasingly more concerning. So there's several things to do. Like one, you need to take an assessment of your environment. Oftentimes it's very helpful to bring in a cybersecurity firm to help you with it. You certainly should have cybersecurity insurance and practice NIST standards, which is just the National Institute for Standards of Technology, and like your framework for your various financial compliance requirements and various healthcare requirements related to IT and security. They're just NIST standards. And it's just like, here is the best practice way to manage data. And typically when you're implementing these, you're also increasing the efficiency of your IT systems. So I mean, it's really solid practices to be doing, whether you're super concerned about the security or not. It still makes your system and networks better and more effective.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think those 4 bullet points there all tie in, right? So the risk assessment that needs to be conducted, and hiring a security firm, those things are becoming the necessary just to get insurance, because they're going to ask, what is your managed service provider? What services do they provide for you? Sometimes they'll ask the managed service provider to complete a form just based on their internal practices and procedures, or some of the stuff that they're asking, the barrier to entry is way techier and more difficult. The client's like, I don't know, I paid you to figure that out. You answer this, right? So those things are going hand in hand with just being able to obtain the coverage in the first place. And they haven't formally, there's no regulatory body like a HIPAA, like a GLBA, like you have in other industries, but NIST seems to be probably the most recognized standard for those things. So again, those are the things that carriers are starting to go off of and say, well, we want multi-factor, we want, remote cloud backup with a 3-2-1, so that if one goes down, you've got the other option, and no one location can just kill everything. There's 120, 130 points I think that NIST makes, and some aren't relevant to everybody, but there's a core 25 to 50 that I think everybody should be doing or already doing, right? I mean, I don't think I could open a Gmail or a Yahoo account today without alphanumeric and special character and all that stuff. So I think we've all adopted those things, but consulting with someone like you and your firm, that's where you're going to see those next level things that you're like, I wasn't aware that was a thing. This is pretty cool. Or, man, I feel better now that we've implemented X, Y, Z. We're in a better spot. And like you said, it's not just to have that expense to prevent it. It's also that some of those solutions can also make them a more effective business, and run smoother. So it's not all just avoid the risk. There's also some benefits. I'm sure you could speak to why this is a better solution than whatever else, that they're currently doing.
Totally. So, I mean, we kind of touched on why getting a risk assessment, but just if you go back and look at data, 2020 had more incidents than the prior 5 years. 60% of small businesses that suffer a cyber attack go out of business within 6 months. Like, I'm not trying to get into that statistic. I like my small business, and so it's like we do risk assessments every year just to maintain our HIPAA compliance. But a lot of people are like, oh, it's not going to be me because I'm a small business. Like, we're the easiest targets because we have the it's not me attitude, and that's being recognized and being really heavily focused on. So we also, I mean, a lot of us store either finance data or healthcare data or both, and those are that's the money shot for them.
Absolutely. The biggest industries that are attacked are healthcare, professional services, and financial. And I don't know how they differentiate professional services versus financial, but I was looking at the last year's net diligence report, and that's where they're saying those are probably 50% of all the industries that are attacked. It's in those three areas, if not more. And the report that I get, it divides companies between small and large. Well, they define large companies as $2 billion or above. So when they say these numbers, this report that we have for last year, when 99% of the claims are happening to small businesses, I'm like, well, everyone's a small business if we're talking under 2 bill. So that's kind of why we scaled our numbers back. But I think the reason people are naive about, oh, we'll never be impacted, we're not that big, it's because the 2-3 person accounting firm, the 4-person doctor's practice, the general practitioner, that's not going to make the news if they go out of business. Maybe a few hundred people were impacted by some sort of a breach or them going out, but it's not millions. It's not a Target, Equifax, Home Depot scale issue where there's millions and millions of people impacted. That's all clickbait. That's all people saying, oh, I went to Target last month, let me check this. I've shopped there within the last year. And so that gets more eyes. So my logic on that is we're just not seeing the stuff that isn't all that newsworthy.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, where people's misconception from that, kind of can come from, is they're just that we don't see that scale of it on the news. It's the larger stuff, but the reality is it happens, tenfold to the smaller companies than it does the larger. And also, if the big boys out there can't keep folks out, when they're spending, millions and millions on infrastructure and security and all this stuff, what chance do the you and I's of the world have? So we've got to do things to just make it harder on them, because more often than not, it's not a targeted attack. It's a buckshot approach, and you just happen to be the one that fell for it. Some things are attacked, but again, more it's just a general, I'm going to send this out and see who takes the bait, who actually clicks the link or downloads the attachment or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely just insane here. And I think that 60% after first 6 months or something like that, it goes up, it continues to increase over 12 months and 24 months. So like your longevity of surviving after a cyber attack without some sort of insurance is really, really not good.
It hits the budget hard.
Yes, it's something we don't want to have to shell out of pocket. And if we do, it's like, well, it was either this or pay rent this month, so everyone work from home.
So the risk assessment, it covers some main areas, like you're just trying to identify where your risk is. What I found a lot of times, I'll come in and take over the IT services for existing clinics and stuff, and they have IT and all that. And what we find is there's just like a ton of configurations that would fall in line with NIST standards that just aren't there. And they're like real easy to do. You just go in and you do some clicking around inside your server environment, push the policies out to the workstations. I mean, it's a negligible amount of effort a lot of times on a majority of those things. And a lot of people already have the capability of having that. They just are working with someone who doesn't stay focused on what the compliance requirements are, which again are just like NIST standards basically. And taking care of this stuff like literally keeps money in your pocket. It reduces the risk while also increasing your process efficiency at the office and creates standardization across your network.
Derrick, do you come across things like that? Like you said, real easy switches, just make MFA a thing on email, you're going to get a text message, and go. Do you find that clients are sometimes maybe like apprehensive about going down that road because they assume that there's a significant cost to get compliant and do some of those security things? Or you think it's more the current regime just wasn't aware of doing the right stuff?
I think a lot of it's just change, or they're like, oh, my job's already really hard, I don't want to deal with more change. Or it becomes a human resources issue if you go in and like make a lot of these super easy configuration changes. Then you have staff that are like reporting to their supervisor how hard it is now, when in fact it's just like, oh, this is different and I'm not used to it. Like it doesn't take long to get used to most of the stuff, but I've seen just plenty of IT companies that'll give people like local administrator rights on their computer which means they can install whatever they want, install payloads or whatever, so they can get fewer calls and make it seem like everything works really well, when in fact they're just making the environment much more vulnerable to issues. And so when we come in there and we don't operate at that complacent level, it seems scary at first, but it's really just a change thing and setting expectations that it's like, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm probably going to find a bunch of stuff. We're going to pick the top 3 to roll out this week, set the stage for the staff, do 3 more in a couple of weeks, and just kind of iterate through it. So I can get what I need and they can get what they need, and we can not create a lot of rough waves from the human resources perspective.
Understood. Yeah, no one wants to end up in the HR office, right? So, but yeah, I can understand that. I know that, in the past, there had been tax credits and government money available for businesses to invest. So a lot of our tech companies were, just inundated with work orders and folks that want to up things and do that. So I know that moved the needle. So I didn't know if finance also was one of the hindrances, but I can also see the productivity and I don't want to relearn it, I retire in 5 years kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the bigger thing. Like a lot of time, like if they need to get an enterprise firewall on or something like that, that's usually easier to explain and like has less of a human resources issue. For at least on the healthcare side, it's dealing with the change management and the people side of the equation, because they just want to like see as many patients as possible, focus on making sure everyone's taken care of and getting the right health treatments, instead of like, oh, my computer locked, I've been in the room with the patient for 15 minutes. I just want it to always be on in this hallway that people are coming up and down. It's like, no, like it's really easy to walk by, put a USB thing in, double click a button, pull it out and keep going without anyone checking on you, from a bad actor standpoint.
If there's an opportunity, someone will take advantage of it, right? So don't tempt them by having it as an option,
Yeah. So let's get into some assessment components here. Like this is like Josh, his company has a series of questions that they go through and inquire about in order to determine like what the risk is of providing insurance to your company. You want to go through some of these?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it kind of ties in with the NIST standards, but we've worked with, a third party organization that does these risk assessments. They'll do much higher level stuff than we do. But so that's why they're happy to look at these forms, and they've identified, hey, if you don't have certain things in place, you're just a lot riskier. And ultimately, insurance is probably one of the only things that I can think of we pay money into to hopefully never use. But at the same time, we want to get good coverage. It better work if we need it. We don't want to break the bank just to have it, because otherwise we price ourselves to the point where, hey, let's just invest this in something else. And if a rainy day comes, we'll cash out. We're better off that way than just throwing the money into insurance every year. So, a lot of what we look for, we want commercial grade firewall and antivirus. There are differences. It's just like any other business, right? You can go and get the latest and greatest, and let's take golf. I've been looking for a couple of new clubs this year. You can get the tour level amazing, pay a few $100 extra for it. But does it make sense? Is it a necessary am I going to play that much better? Well, no. And same thing here, right? Not all software is created the same. So maybe the entry level or whatever came on the device for free, isn't probably the most secure solution. So I'm not saying we have to have the enterprise mega super plus version, but you want something that's commercial grade so that it's picking up more things. Plus, it's going to be able to operate and function more for your needs of a business than it would just for probably what it was designed for, which was like one person. And then again, the backups. We've talked about it earlier. You want to rely on those backups, but you're only as good as your backup. So what is it that we are backing up? What's critical? What's not? And then making sure that those things are being backed up. So testing and restoring and making sure, because sometimes, the system's supposed to notify us that it's being done and everything's good. Sometimes those things, error out. Sometimes, someone gets in there and changes the settings, so it's not doing what it was set up to, and you're not getting the notifications. Maybe they are, things like that. So strong backups, tougher, I guess, moat is what I would call the firewall. You get a moat around your business. And then we're going to do the backup. So even if something does get through the moat, it burns down, we can still restore that. We just need your machine. We'll wipe it, restore from the last backup. You might lose a couple hours, maybe a day's worth of stuff that was on there, but it's better than coming back from scratch. Now, if we're perfect scenario, we just restore, you didn't miss a beat. It just depends on, what level of backups that you're doing, but we do want something offsite. I know that can be tricky with medical clients. They do like to have historically a lot of stuff there on site. And so you just got to be aware of that exposure and say, is it worth it? Would we be better off to make sure that we're getting some sort of a copy somewhere else outside of our organization? And even if it's not just a hack threat, it could be something like a natural disaster. I've seen tornadoes go across the country, this time of year. It's just what happens. And imagine if that's your business and all your equipment was in there and it's just in pieces a county over, right? How are we going to go back from there? So it's not always just the security aspect. It's the productivity, that you want to be able to have in the event that there's a fire, a break-in, a tornado, life, right? Who knows? So that's always something that we're looking to make sure that we've got there. Let's see here. Yeah, you want to make sure that we're updating passwords, usernames, make sure that things aren't being shared, make sure that we're changing those, we're using something smart. We talked about the password management stuff earlier. So, make sure that you're using those, because it should be an ongoing process. So if you're just writing it on paper, eventually you're either going to, run out of space, cross off that one too many times, keep replacing it. And then I think that the biggest thing that, isn't a cookie cutter solution is the training, right? It's human error. I think that roughly 20% of the cyber claims from last year that we saw weren't from bad actors and hackers. They were from some staff mistakes, just general, oops, sorry, I didn't think that I deleted that, it's gone, or I thought that was you emailing me. Now I've got a virus, and now we all have a virus, or whatever. So just doing those training and making sure that everyone in the organization is up to speed. Somebody might have an office manager, an information officer, something like that. And that person probably knows their stuff, but are they relaying that all the way down the chain of command? Because you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if, it's just a part-timer, if it's, somebody that's doing entry-level type stuff, doesn't matter. If they've got a machine that connects to the internet, they've got the same exposure, and now they can let someone in. So just letting people, access to that information, understanding it, and man, I had no clue. It's a real eye-opener. It just makes us more savvy, because at the end of the day, if we can't stay out of our own way, we have no chance.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let's see. Yep. VPNs are great. Again, access points and just making it limited to who can get on. We've talked about folks that are specifically tying a machine to a VPN. There's some, geo restrictions that we can set on this. So, you've got to be in a certain place to use that. You've got other things that'll say, hey, if it's coming from here, it looks like it's coming from there, we're going to block it just based on where they're at. Because we know that most things from Russia this week probably aren't going to be, relevant. Let's go ahead and block those off, or something like that. Yeah. Always good. Encryption. We've got to make it more difficult. It's not 100%, but it does give you a significantly better chance of avoiding the threats. Because if someone can get in there and they can't see the information, well, even better. MFA, we've harped on that. That's got to just be the go-to. Have it everywhere that you can. Any of your management resources, anything that has a database and information on it, obviously email accounts. It's 2 seconds to get that text and put in a 6-digit code. Or there are other applications you can have on your phone. I use Authenticator, and I just say, yeah, I want to approve it, put my fingerprint on the back, and we're done. I don't even have to type. And was that a 6? Is that, I'm good. So there are workarounds. It doesn't have to be this huge inconvenience. I've heard folks push back. Well, it's going to slow down my day. I don't have time for all this. I'm like, average, ransom attack, cyber event, downtime, something like 2 weeks. I think
that'll really cut into your day.
Yeah. So, what's more of an interruption? 2 seconds to get this text message, or being down for 2 weeks, because one's going to have a significantly larger financial impact than the other. Yeah. So just be proactive, stay out in front of that stuff. Personally identifiable records. Obviously, different industries have different levels that they need to do. So some folks have a HIPAA or something like that sitting over top of them. Others don't, but you still have the NIST framework, and different states have different rules. So you have to comply with state regulations. And then what do we do if something's exposed? But I think what you got to really boil it down to is, what's the definition in your state of personally identifiable information? It's not the same for all 50. But my rule of thumb has always been, if you can't find it on the county auditor's website, it probably could be. So, it could be a cell phone number, an email address, could be like a billing address or something along those lines, not just, credit card information, social securities, date of births kind of stuff. That's what we all think of. But the reality is, you may have an obligation to respond and notify people that their email address was exposed, their cell phone number was exposed, because just look at how many calls and texts and spam emails you get saying, hey, this is your utility company, this is the FBI, especially now. The IRS, everyone's going to start getting calls about, I'm the police and I'm down the street. Don't take the bait, which goes back to the training as well. Be aware of what's going on out there, so that you're not making the news for the wrong reasons. And then you have PCI. They have their own set of standards that we want to comply with. They rule them out separate from the other regulatory bodies, because technically it's not a government thing, it's the card industry. But just follow those rules, and NIST will pretty much walk you through. Like, all of them tie in and build off of. And then obviously, the HIPAA goes more into the medical aspects, and the PCI goes more into the financial aspects of it. GLBA is more the legal side. But it's just one of those things that it all has a core. And if you follow that NIST core, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot with a couple industry specific modifications.
Yeah, and I plan to, as the year goes on, I'm going to cover, we're going to do a cyber update on HIPAA and how that works. We're going to do something probably about PCI as well. So stay tuned for deeper dives into those kind of regulatory compliance frameworks as the year goes on.
Absolutely. And I love the disaster recovery plan. That when's the best time to do a fire drill, not when you're having an actual fire. So, make sure those things are in place. We know where to go, because it's already a stressful situation. Don't make it worse by not doing it. And test it. Make sure that if we had to, maybe simulate a fire drill. I've had, clients I've suggested talk to your customers and see about running a network down kind of scenario. Shut them down at 8 a.m. on Monday, and see if they can make it till 4 or 5 o'clock. Most folks that have actually taken them up on it, 10 a.m. is about the longest anyone's ever gone without turning it on now, kind of thing.
We got to get back to work.
Yes.
So so really it's just, we need to understand any regulatory compliance we have to do. And Josh's team does a really good job of making sure I have my ducks in a row, because if I don't have my ducks in a row, my clients who get cybersecurity coverage from Josh have to pay more. And so I do my annual HIPAA compliance. I am able to answer favorably on the questions he sends out. So it certainly helps with my rate. And then, like I said, anyone that works with us or any other MSP that Josh works with, they qualify for better price cyber protection, because he already knows that we're doing a good job of protecting our house and providing those protections to our clients.
Absolutely. It's a natural progression, right? You've got to prove that you're doing above and beyond the average MSP for our carriers to allow you in the program. And then obviously, if you can show that your clients are doing the same thing, they're a lot less risky to the carriers. So they're able to access discount, cyber insurance, as opposed to, some of what we're seeing across the industry where just rates are going up, up, up. So it's why it's just benefits you to work with an MSP that knows their stuff. And, sometimes they're hard to differentiate between without learning firsthand that they're not good. So
Yeah.
to speak to your credit, work with Derrick and his team. They're fantastic, and hopefully they're going to put you in a better spot if you're not already there, and also it can help you guys on the insurance front as well.
And so depending on if you guys take payments or not, like they've got some extra particular questions that they cover on the payment side of things. Making sure everything's encrypted, try to make sure it's not run through your actual local area network. So like having it physically segmented goes a long way. It makes my job a lot easier when it's like that, as far as answering the 300 questions that various banks and financial institutions send out to our clients who just immediately forward it to us and be like, hey, here's some PCA stuff. It's like, oh, good, we're physically segmented on the network. We don't have to answer hardly any questions now. Makes it a lot nicer.
Absolutely.
And then they also ask some additional healthcare questions. So the healthcare clients, they already know they have to do HIPAA every year, do their 6 different audits that help them get the risk assessment completed and all that kind of stuff. And then HIPAA also requires that you do training and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really important to make sure you're able to answer these questions favorably. And one of the ways to do it is making sure you're taking care of doing best practices. Social engineering is another one that they take a deep dive into, and a lot of this ties back to making sure we're doing the training. Like phishing and simulation training, cybersecurity training, it's all like super, super duper important. So like whenever you're going to get your policy, like take those questions like really serious, because like they're just trying to help you do a better job of helping yourself. So like say on these policies here, you answer these questions, but then maybe you're just trying to get through it and get a better price. Like that's a big risk. Like you need to be honest with your carrier, because like if you're not, and then it's determined that you said, yes, I am doing multi-factor authentication or MFA, but you're really not, and you're hacked due to that, like the carriers are probably not going to pay your claim. And executives are now being held at a much higher level of responsibility with this. So like to where they're being targets for holding the book, the book stops there. And where Josh was talking about the costs of like, it could be really expensive if you get hacked. And it's not just like, oh, we had downtime. Like what if you have 50,000 contacts? You got to like produce a stamp, you got to create letters, you got to print letters, you got to pay for the printers, the toner, you got to pay someone to stuff the envelope, you got to pay someone to take the envelope somewhere to get it mailed. So say that's like $2 and you have 50,000 contacts in your database that got hacked. That's $100,000 before you deal with any regulatory compliance to just know that like, hey, I need to notify everybody so I don't get hit with additional fines. And so Josh provided some of these extra costs here on what the averages look like to respond to an event for a small medium business. And like between 2019 and 2020, it nearly doubled from 60,000 to 113,000 just for the services, so counsel, forensics, notifications and whatnot. Notifications themselves went from like 5,000 to 85,000, which is like ridiculous. So that means there's just like a whole lot more like repositories with more units of data being compromised. And the average number exposed in 2020 was almost 100,000 individuals' records. So like,
that's what's driving
$2. Yeah, now you're at 200,000 before you've even done forensics or anything, like, holy cow.
I'd have to find that this was the one year in my report where they didn't provide the average cost per breach because they said there were so many variables. And again, when you're lumping everyone from 2 billion and below in one box, I can get where those numbers would be skewed anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of hoping to see what the average was. But I mean, I think you could do the math back on it, if you divide number of claims by the cost. Either way, the short form version of it is it's getting worse, it's going up, things are more expensive. I don't see that changing.
I don't either, but what we can do is like make sure we're doing this stuff's all pretty basic to me. Like I've been doing it for 20 years and like the foundation of it hasn't changed. You need to make sure you do maintenance for all your devices and endpoints, which is really just making sure they're patched, the third-party software is patched, the operating system's patched. Make sure you have appropriate endpoint security service protection. So that could be like antivirus, malware. They come in a lot of different varieties and stuff. You want to make sure you're keeping support up to date with your operating environment. Make sure you have contracts in place with your line of business tool. That way you can get all your updates. Make sure your firewall's got support, all those kind of things. And you need to make sure you are regularly reviewing things, which I also consider doing our annual risk audits. So I'm a big fan of checklists. I don't know about you, Josh, but like without a checklist, like my processes varies, right?
Oh, absolutely. I need that to stay on task just in life. What am I doing today?
Yeah. So like I like the IT checklist, employee checklist, and these aren't like exactly exhaustive, but they are helpful snippets. And they vary depending on business to business and like what all's in that environment, that kind of stuff. But
it's a good barometer for a snapshot at any given time. Where are we at on the radar kind of thing?
Totally.
Like, missing a lot? Are we answering a lot of no's? Do we have all yeses? That kind of stuff. It's good to have and just allow people to see something that gauges that is industry recognized, not just our 2 cents. It's this is what the standards say to do. Where do you stand?
Yeah, and so like you'll start seeing a lot of parallels as we go through this stuff over time. Like a lot of what my checklist looks like what Josh's risk assessment he sends to his prospective clients looks like. So we're not going to take everything in deep dive because we talked about a lot of it already, but encryption's important, making sure you've got strong passwords, you're not giving people administrative rights on their computer. Like I don't log onto any computer directly as an admin. I do have credentials, and whenever I need elevated privilege, I use that privilege, but I don't log into my computer with any admin credentials ever. Mobile device management, so you can like remotely wipe stuff, is really, really relevant in today's operating environment. Again, making sure you can have encrypted communication for your files. Now this is probably the 4th time they've heard it: multi-factor authentication, password managers. So it's probably getting like really redundant by the time we get to the solutions. The solutions are following what NIST says, making sure like when you get that risk assessment, you're being honest, and like if you're not able to say yes to the things that Josh or like any other cyber security insurance carrier provides, you should go talk to your IT consultant and get that taken care of, because like this is like boilerplate stuff. Been doing it for decades at this point.
There's less leniency for not having certain things in place, right? The really basic stuff isn't going to be a slap on the wrist. Now, some weird one-off, crazy scenario, probably going to be a little more lenient. Hey, you were doing the right stuff. This was just a fluke situation. Whereas, hey, you don't have antivirus, or you don't have, that's where they're not going to really want to work with you. They're going to bring the hammer down. So avoid that. And at the same time, you're paying this money into the insurance or to get the insurance. Like, you want it to work if we need it. Failing to do that or lying on those, applications could potentially void that coverage. Now it's all a waste of money. So you're always better to be transparent, answer the forms honestly, and then, hey, maybe the price isn't what it could have been, but it's better than nothing. But as long as we've presented everything as it is today to the carrier, they may say, hey, could you implement this? Or, well, we might reduce this particular aspect of coverage because this isn't in place. We see it as a vulnerability, but you're not going to get completely denied, the claim, as opposed to saying, oh yeah, we do that. you see it. I mean, everything's timestamped, all the settings,
Mhm.
configurations, when was it modified, adjusted. So there's no saying, oh, we didn't change that, or we didn't undo this. Or once they see that you've done this in, real time, you can document it.
Yeah,
You're in trouble anyway. So it's like, just be transparent, follow, suggestions and guidelines that are provided, and you're going to be in a much better spot from both business perspective, technology perspective. Either way, you win.
totally. So you want to have your employee checklist, which who knew we're going to mention MFA again, because it's like that important. Like it's so easy to implement. It's we just read so much stuff about like this is the way people get compromised, and sometimes it takes someone having this issue before they're like, oh yeah, I can deal with that. Waiting 2 seconds to get a text message authenticate into my email. So you also need to make sure the employees are, know to lock their computer. Only, don't put business information on personal devices and stuff like that. Be mindful when you're having conversations. So eavesdropping can't happen. Do your security training that the employer provides, because they're providing it to help you and also help themselves. You're running on video conference calls, just stay muted. If you're doing the remote work thing, really need to have a dedicated space for it. Try to keep the kids out of there, because you don't need them on there accidentally deleting stuff. That kind of stuff. Security awareness is kind of like the last little bullet point. Don't share corporate tools with your family. Like if you get sent home with a business laptop, don't let your kids get on there and play videos and that kind of stuff. And also, they should be auto locking and should have the same security policies that they would have if they're at the office. Stay off the social media. Don't get vulnerable to the crafty attacks that happen out there. And make sure you're taking the remote workforce cybersecurity training. And as business owners, need to make sure we're giving that to our workforce so they know how to operate in their less secure home environment. So we can totally help you get a free Office 365 health audit if you'd like. We could help you get a remote work checklist. I can send out a copy of the report that Josh provided to leverage some data assets for this talk. We're happy to do a remote audit for up to 3 remote workforce members, do a free dark web credential scan. All you have to do is email me at info@htadvisorsllc.com with the subject free, and I'll get you set up with all these activities and services and reports. So yeah, just drop us a note. Happy to help. Really, we're doing all this because we're trying to help everybody have a much safer operating environment, and just be able to work and not be paying out $200,000 because you had 100,000 records compromised. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can also, Josh's contacts on here, his email. So we'll just kind of end on this slide and take this info down, hit us up. We're here to help.
Absolutely. If there's questions, follow up, you got my email, you got my phone number there. Reach out to Derrick if there's anything I can help with or expand on. That's what we're here for.
Cool. I really appreciate you taking time to kick this cybersecurity update off with me, Josh.
Happy to help. Glad to, appreciate you having me on and being able to share and contribute.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will. I know we went a few minutes over the hour, but thank you guys for all sticking with us through it. This has also been live streamed to Facebook, so if you need to review it again or share it with colleagues, we're on Facebook, Healthcare Technology Advisors, or hit us up via email or call, and I'll send you the direct link. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Sounds great.
All right, take care.
See you, Derrick.
Bye.